So, good morning, everybody. It's the final day of the S&D group meeting here in Vienna, and we are very happy to welcome a lot of also international guests to our Western Balkan Leaders Summit with Western Balkan Enlargement Now, which is a good chance to discuss a lot of political issues on a high-ranked participation. Before said good morning, I want to also welcome some special guests which joined us from Austria in the auditorium, which is our former group leader Hannes Swoboda, our Austrian former Foreign Minister Peter Jankovic, former High Representative Wolfgang Petritsch, and special welcome also to the former Austrian Federal President Heinz Fischer, which is with us here now, which is a special honor also. Secondly, of course, with a high-ranked also participation today, the first podium, and therefore we welcome also Nermin Nikšić, which is written here former Prime Minister, but we can also say, hopefully, future Prime Minister from Bosnia. We have Albin Kurti, the Prime Minister from Kosovo with us. Welcome, Albin. We have Dimitar Kovacevski, the Prime Minister from North Macedonia, with us. And we have Raško Končević, the Deputy Prime Minister from Montenegro, with us. And last, but for sure not least, is Isabel Santos, a member of the European Parliament and also rapporteur for Albania. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to our distinguished group leader, Irache Garcia Perez, to open the meeting.
Good morning, dear President, dear Prime Minister, colleagues, friends. I wish to start by thanking for joining us today here in Vienna. Special thanks also to Andreas and to the S&D Group, our group, for this important initiative. It is a real honor to welcome you here for such an important meeting with so many distinguished guests from our political family. Let me begin by saying that as a president of the group of Socialist Democrats in the European Parliament, I want to convey the strongest message of support of our group to the Western Balkans, to the accession process, and to EU membership. Our European family will not be complete until you are part of it in full. I also want to reiterate that despite the many crises that we currently face, Russia's war of aggression, the energy crisis, and still the effects of the pandemic, the Western Balkans as a whole are and remain a key priority of our political family. And now I will continue in Spanish, maybe you will need a translation. La ampliación.
Enlargement is the best and most successful of European policies. It's a strategic investment in stability and prosperity of the European continent, today more than ever. You can't have a foreign policy which would be successful of the European Union without a successful enlargement policy. Thanks to the never-ending efforts of our political family in the institutions of the European Union, member states, but in particularly in the Western Balkans, have been involved in an enlargement process. And it's, again, credible, foreseeable, and also fair. The negotiations have started for the enlargement of North Macedonia and Albania with a trajectory which will be confirmed in the progress reports that were published back in October. This is a clear sign of success, and I think we can all be proud of that. Now, very soon, we hope that the European Council will confirm this with the granting of candidate status to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then also looking at the new status for citizens of Kosovo. So we see this as having new impetus to our work. You're a model to follow in the entire region and beyond the region. We've seen this through the years. We've seen this as many decisions have been taken by the European Commission and by the Council. We've seen that this has led to great success. This is important for the European Union, too, and for the citizens of the European Union, because our union represents a lot in the Western Balkans and in the continent of Europe as a whole, and even in the world. Now, that's why I'd also like to thank each and every one of you. Thank you very much. You've been committed. You've made efforts. Without that, none of this would have been possible. This is a test that the social democratic focus not only works, but it is also capable of keeping its promises. You are a model for the success of enlargement, and we see that when we're in governments, we see that the social democrats, when we're governing, we can do things. We have a very clear vision, and we were always in the vanguard of the process of enlargement. That was the case in Croatia. That's the case in Montenegro. It's also, again, being very clear in Serbia. Serbia knows, our friends in Serbia knows exactly what happens when the right is in power. Our colleagues in Bosnia also understand that you could not find a greater contrast than we look at what the difference between our point of view and theirs. Social democracy is the political family for peace, for reconciliation, and for progress. But the social democrats in Europe also promote democracy. It's dear to their hearts. You cannot have social democracy and progressive policies without democracy with a capital D. And this is very, very clear. The Western Balkans now is part of our commitment, part of our vision for the future, important to our societies. The right is willing to dismantle everything that we have achieved: democracy, reconciliation, gender equality, labor rights, environmental protections, well-being, and solidarity in all its forms. This is the basis of our political action and program. We've got Orban in Hungary, Morsi in Poland, Oci in Serbia, Todi in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's the team of the right today. That right is willing to go beyond the bounds of democracy and to undermine our institutions. That right is willing to take power whatever it costs. They're willing to reduce freedoms. They're willing to upset the balances and equilibria. They're not concerned with criticism. They've really broken the rules of democracy. And once they've broken democracy, it's very difficult to limit the damage. There's no space for progressive policies in a system which is characterized by autocrats. This has to be at the heart and center of our concerns. That's why I think that it's even more important today that we honor the efforts and the work towards enlargement, the work of our leaders in our parties. Under our leadership, we've made clear progress in various countries, and the progress of these past months has been yet another sign of the recognition for our work. The European Union has recognized your efforts, your success, and has sent out a very clear signal of support. The last achievements are going to be important for the enlargement process. They give a very clear eye to the road map forward for European values in the region. The coming period, we will see opportunities. It's a unique opportunity to continue to build on this positive trajectory and to achieve yet more. It's very important at this stage that we build upon the political impulses here. In this process, all of you can count on the strong support of our group and of our political family. There could not be more consensus about our relations, the relations between the Western Balkans and our institutions and our shared values in Brussels, in our capitals, and also in the region. we can see that we are the unconditional supporters, and we will give strong support and be strong allies in this process. Friends, the Social Democrats are the European political family which is the most committed to enlargement of the Western Balkans. The parties for social democratic tendency in the Western Balkans also support modernism and progressive attitudes. They provide a very promising political platform to make enlargement a success. The Social Democratic group in the European Parliament is the second largest and most important group in the Camera, and we are very strong advocates of enlargement. That means you're going to have a very strong voice from our political family in Europe. The Social Democrats are united in their support for the Western Balkans. Now, speaking of values, if I may, let me just take advantage of this opportunity to also mention the work that you have done. You've got some difficulties in terms of the war. We've got the war, the illegal war started by Putin. It's not just an attack on Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. It's also an attack against the very fundamentals of the European Union and of international order based upon law and the charters of the United Nations. It's an attack against our decision today to support unilateralism. That's part of our makeup as a political group. You've all taken great efforts in light of the Russian aggression. And we feel the solidarity. We feel the solidarity with the Ukrainian people. And I want to salute you for your leadership there and for your vision at this crossroads.
The S&D Group is bringing together all progressive leaders from the region for this S&D Western Balkans Leaders Summit to take stock of the current momentum and to set the way forward with an important political declaration to advance our progressive enlargement agenda. I would like to thank you once again for accepting our invitation. I look forward to working closely with you. And I'm sure that today, with you, I am more convinced than ever that indeed we can and we will deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Irache, for this very important input also, because it's underlining that beginning of the week, we had the Western Balkan Summit in Tirana, which was, and congratulations also to Prime Minister Edi Rama for this big success. And it was the first EU Western Balkan Enlargement Summit since more or less 2 decades. Thessaloniki 2003, 2022 Tirana. And I think it was a successful summit in Tirana. For example, also the agreement on the roaming, which sounds quite little, but at the end, this is affecting the real life of the real people every day, every minute. So welcome also Milo Djukanovic. Hello. President of Montenegro, welcome with us. So the roaming was important, but also other steps has to follow, because I was asked today in the morning, what is the difference on enlargement between us and also, let's say, other political groups? And for us, Social Democrats, enlargement is a political tool, but it's also based on values. It is to improve the living condition in the region, to improve the rule of law, to improve the functioning of the state, and to create social cohesion and social and economic progress also in the region. And therefore, I think the European Union has to speed up, and the role also of the Social Democrats of us is to push also the European Union to make out of a long process a short but successful process. So to jump in our debate, as we have so many guests, we have to be very tight also on time. I will start asking, naming Nikšić, what is your assumption of the Tirana summit, what you have taken from there, but also as the elections just recently have been in Bosnia, what do you think is the major outcome of the election in Bosnia? As they have also shown that people in Bosnia want to have a fundamental change also of politics. And last point, how we as Social Democrats can support you in this.
Dame i gospodo, cijenjeni prijatelji, drugarci i drugovi, izuzetno mi je drago što...
Colleagues, I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share my opinions with you today, and also what our party thinks, the SDP, in terms of the enlargement to encompass the Western Balkans. Now, as was said, we recently held general elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'd like to say a few things about them briefly. Bosnia and Herzegovina share the values of the European Union. I think this is an example of living with diversity. We are a country which for centuries was built by brought together Orthodox and Catholic Christians and also Muslims and Jews. All of them are part of the unique identity of our country. Now, Sarajevo, as is known, is the Jerusalem of the Balkans. And like Jerusalem, we are the focus of conflicts throughout our history. Conflict imposed from outside. We don't have internal problems. We do have undoubtedly internal issues, but really the confidence of our citizens is something that always has to be renewed. It has been undermined by the wars in the 90s and by the division and the ethnic hate which we currently see expressed, that some like to keep alive. So, when it comes to global flows and political change in our country, it would seem that our country now has a new opportunity to become an integral member of a family of European countries. And the European Union is also becoming aware of this situation, and that if they don't strengthen a multi-ethnic community in our country, a country which has existed now for centuries, well, there's not much hope for the plurality of Europe. It's likely to fall into the hands of the right, and the attack of Russia on Ukraine has given new hope to Russians and their allies in Europe. For decades, we were the victims of secessionism, of separatism, and this rhetoric of violence that we're seeing in Ukraine perpetrated by Russia. We know what this is very well. We're familiar with this. We've gone through these issues now for the last 25 years. We've seen that the aggression on Ukraine, well, this was an alarm bell to the world as to the vulnerability of democracy in some countries, and in our country in particular. Europe cannot allow the countries of the Balkans fight these forces of darkness on their own. There are responsibilities that we have to meet to enter the European Union, but we also need your help. We cannot defend ourselves against these powers that lie far from Vienna, Brussels, and the United States. The United States, the European Union, the UK, all of our friends need to help us to meet our objectives that most of our citizens so strongly desire, to become members of the European Union. The European Union cannot allow that radical structures hold the citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina hostage. We will meet our responsibilities, but we cannot go down this path alone. We've got to meet us halfway. On the 15th of December, well, that could be a very important day in our history. it's possible that we will get the candidate status awarded that day. I would call upon you to do everything that you can in your power to make that a reality. We understand very well that we have not been perfect as a state. We have also shown, however, a capacity to change in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have the elections of the 3rd of October, and you can see now that we have a president for the first time from the Muslim community, and 11 members of the opposition supported that candidacy. That's something that's never happened before. It's unprecedented. And all of this is important in terms, and they're all in favor of enlargement with the European Union. Now, the SDP group now is the most important member of this coalition, and we're certainly going to support this European process. Well, the electoral system is very complicated in our country. That's why sometimes we have to cooperate with some more conservative parties. Sometimes they're more turned towards nationalism, but nonetheless, we will work to strengthen cooperation across our communities. We have set ambitious deadlines which clearly show what reforms need to be implemented to join the European Union. They're very tight deadlines. We are on that path right now. We hope that Europe also will be on the same path to join us in this effort. Now, I don't know if our politicians deserve this. Our citizens very much deserve this. They yearn to join the European Union. They see themselves as part of the European family. They are turning their vision towards Europe and turning their backs on the division in Bosnia. You can see that these people can change. We look at everyone who fled their countries during the times of war. Many now are leaving because of instability in the country. Now, in these elections, these recent elections, we want to change the situation. We have seen parties that were diametrically opposed before, now cooperating. We're leaving the problems that seem so unsolvable behind. We're cooperating now. We are moving forward. And if we get candidate status, undoubtedly, that will be an additional impetus to continue those efforts. If we don't, well, I think there's a possibility that we will find ourselves in a downward spiral characterized by disappointment. So if we get the status as a candidate country, I think that would be an important step forward for the entire region. It would be a message that Europe also is keeping an eye on us, and this will help us overcome the negativities in our region. Let's not forget that the Balkans, there are many negative players. They're fostered by Russia. Russia has influence in our region. Let's not forget the attacks in Macedonia, North Macedonia, on the government, the radicalization in Serbia after the assassination of George Zinjic, the president, some 20 years ago. We've seen what is happening in Montenegro. We've seen that Bosnia is being used, Bosnia and Herzegovina is being used by negative players. We've seen Moscow really infiltrate these countries, even going so far as to Croatia. This is all a sign that Russian influence is disseminating throughout the region. This is something that we need to change. The European Union cannot turn a blind eye to this, because otherwise the Russians will be successful. Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Western Balkans in general is a region which needs financial support too, to strengthen its energy independence in the region. Bosnia can be an energy hub for the region and for Europe as a whole. We will modernize our institutions and to develop programs aimed at our citizens. There we need help from Europe that will help the Bosnians understand that Europe citizens understand our problems too. Now, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, with our new government, you and the European Union have a partner here, a sincere and ambitious partner, which is clearly aiming at joining the European Union. Now, we hope that the European Union will understand that and provide us with very clear support. Clear support also at the level of the High Representative, so that everything can be done to try and overcome the obstacles which are being put in our way by the opponents of enlargement in Europe. We see that we've made mistakes, but mistakes are always part of a process. We therefore hope that the High Representative will do something concrete to ensure that we do achieve candidate status. We're going to do our part. Our Constitution has its problems, has its issues. It's a product of the past. It's something that we inherited from past regimes. That's why we need to make sure that we find a way to get around these obstacles in our Constitution. The Constitution certainly doesn't reflect what our people want today. I'm convinced that we will be able to develop a Constitution which will not be discriminatory. In fact, the court in Strasbourg on human rights has declared that our Constitution was discriminatory. We want a European Constitution. We're headed towards Europe. That's what we want. That's where we're headed. And the European Union also needs to show that they want us to be members, too, of the European Union. Now, beyond the financial support, we need political support, too. Now, with multi-ethnic Bosnia, we also need a multi-ethnic Europe, which would reflect the multi-ethnicity of our country. We hope that we'll be ready at the next summit to be held in Sarajevo, and we look forward to your support with the SDP family to support us there. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now, the next I would ask our friend Albin, as Prime Minister from Kosovo, how you see the outcome of Tirana summit, but also, of course, how you see the developments of the increased talks and negotiation between Kosovo and Serbia, which also now under the leadership of the High Representative and the future perspectives. And maybe for all our participants, in order to go through our dense program, stick to some 5-6 minutes speaking limit if possible.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here today with all of you. I, of course, welcome the initiative of EU Western Balkans Summit in Tirana, the first ever outside the EU since 2000 summit when it took place in Zagreb. I appreciate that the EU Western Balkans Summit has strengthened a call for the acceleration of the accession process. In addition, what we are very much optimistic about is Berlin process, which got rejuvenated with Chancellor Olaf Scholz. On 3rd of November in Berlin, we have signed 3 agreements, all 6 countries of Western Balkans, and now we look forward to ratification of these agreements in each of our parliaments. 3 agreements being: 1 to travel with ID cards only across all borders among us, then recognition of higher education and likewise professional qualifications. Besides Berlin process, I believe that we need to think outside of the coordinates of the current situation for the way forward. It is important to have a tide in the Western Balkans which is going to lift all the boats at the same time. Something like EEA, EFTA EEA. We know that countries like Austria and Portugal first were part of EEA and then they joined EU. We could call this, for example, CEFTA, Southeastern European Free Trade Agreement, or Common Regional Market, as it is in Berlin process, being advanced further. because we need an accelerated process for EU membership. So far, we have been speaking of EU perspective, of EU integration, but we need EU membership. EU perspective as a buzzword is not enough anymore. And to this end, we must have some milestones and some timeframes. It is difficult to mobilize people and to sustain optimism and enthusiasm for EU, which is very important, as long as we do not have timelines. Be that 2030 with other separated sequences, let's say 2024, 2027, what we will reach at which year in order to have all the Western Balkans on board to move towards EU and join EU as soon as possible. I believe that now the main driver of renewed interest of the European institutions and member states for enlargement is geopolitics. Out of this unfortunate events with Russian aggression and invasion in Ukraine, with the involvement of third powers, therefore undermining EU security, then rather by genuine political thinking of the mutual interest to be united in the EU. Unfortunately, therefore, it needed Russian war in Ukraine to exacerbate the urgency for answering Western Balkans' expectations and EU's commitment. It is of utter importance that Socialists and Democrats takes the lead on the integration of our region. The narrative about the Western Balkans cannot be led by far-right forces, by those who think that economic development doesn't need quality democracy, and then again, democracy doesn't need human rights and political pluralism. We know very well that exactly the opposite is the truth. We must have human rights and political pluralism for quality democracy, which is the only way to make economic development a just and sustainable one. This being said, I'm happy to announce that as the leader of self-determination movement, we have sent to Party of European Socialists the request to become an associated member. Also, I want to inform that this month, before Christmas, Kosovo will apply to EU membership, government's position paper available to the group, and we count on the S&D's support and statement to welcome that important step. My government and all our policies are fully in line with the progressive vision of Socialists and Democrats. In regard to the enlargement, I know that Socialists and Democrats sees it as a process of extension of democracy, peace, and prosperity. Enlargement is essential to EU. EU should stay faithful to this essence of her. External enlargement should go hand in hand with internal consolidation. One doesn't have to exclude the other. I believe that European Union in Western Balkans should be homegrown yet not self-made. Not self-made because we need help from outside, but yet it is us who should build EU from ourselves for ourselves. And EU not as an interest as much as value, because together with values, interests will come. We live at times when values and interests must be closely aligned. The new geopolitical challenges have increased the necessity to align with a common foreign and security policy, which Kosovo is doing despite its early stage in the integration process. And in this sense, we should reject neutrality when it comes to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. Neutrality is cynicism. Those who are neutral are cynical, because neutrality implies a certain distanciation from the situation as a matter that you're talking about. And I'm afraid that some of the countries who are pretending to be neutral, obviously their neutrality is fake, but on the other hand, the neutrality of the democratic West towards that neutrality is not fake. So we should quit being neutral towards those who pretend to be neutral. And this will strengthen our solidarity, but also help Ukrainian people to achieve their liberation, out of their struggle, sooner rather than later. Kosovo has been a double success story of NATO intervention to stop genocide of regime of Milosevic, but also to have economic growth together with quality democracy. For example, last year, we improved by 17 places in Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, and then again by 17 places in World Press Freedom Index, Reporters Without Borders, freedom of the media. And second time, we come out first in Western Balkans 6 regarding rule of law according to World Justice Project. Among 14 countries in Eastern Europe, which are still not part of EU, we are number 2 after Georgia. So quality democracy, human rights, political pluralism, good governance go together with economic growth. Last year, we had economic growth of 10.7% of GDP. This year, it will be at least 4% when you subtract the inflation. So we are very optimistic for the future, and we need help from EU to enlarge in Western Balkans, not just that we could benefit, but also because we want to contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, and now is my time to pass the floor to Milo Djukanovski, President of Montenegro and leader of Democratic Party of Socialists in Montenegro. You are a long-time leader in the region. You have a very large and comprehensive view of the reality. And my first question to you is, how do you see the changes during the last 30 years? And when you and other leaders from the region look back, what it should think that you would do in a different way today? Finally, despite some setbacks that always occur, how do you think? Is the region moving on the right way, or you think that could move in a different way?
Poštovana predsjednice,
distinguished President of the S&D in the Croatian Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I believe that for the most part, I will be able to give you the answers to your questions through the speech that I prepared. But in the end, I will also reflect on the questions that you asked me about how I see the past 30 years and maybe what should be done, what should have been done differently. It is a great pleasure to participate at this summit, Western Balkans Enlargement Summit of the Socialists and Democrats. This is a part of the experience of our political family. I would like to thank you because such initiatives are a great support to us in accomplishing our joint European objectives. This meeting is so important because it takes place after the summit in Tirana. It makes it possible for us to sum up the conclusions and to see whether they correspond to the challenges ahead of us. In accordance with this, we have to coordinate the activities of our sister parties. It's an important step in integrating the countries in the Western Balkans into the EU. The summit confirmed that the European Union and the Western Balkans countries are partners in building the democracy, and our joint perspective is our joint strategic objective. In this context, the announcement of the status of the candidate for Bosnia and Herzegovina is a very encouraging piece of news. European Union, through its social plan and economic plans, confirms the role of a crucial partner for the countries of Western Balkans. It helps reduce the effects of the energy crisis. And in order to achieve our ultimate goal, we have to adopt reforms, we have to implement reforms and adopt European standards. I'm sure that this will motivate socialists and democrats to advocate the policy of enlargement in the institutions of the European Union and in the national bodies of the member states. Activities of your leaders, your prime ministers, ministers, MPs, mayors, and other officials are having an influence on the European policy, and they are widely accepted also in our public. In the context of what Alcide de Gasperi said, we have to be led by the idea that we need a united Europe, and Western Balkans is a part of this united Europe. We would like to particularly thank Tonino Picula, who we believe is to thank for the new strategy of enlargement of the European Union. And we believe that such an approach encourages us to implement very demanding reforms because it gives us a clear perspective of membership, a merit-based membership. It's very important to say that at the same time, this is a political and security, in the political and security interest of the European Union. Developments, global developments are quite threatening. We see that there is war on European soil. And in that context, it's important to keep up European values, to observe the values of defending human rights. The principles of democracy cannot be limited only to politics. They have to be spread to all areas of social life. We have to be ready to defend these values from nationalists and populists who use climate challenges, health challenges, and all other challenges to push their populist programs. We have to fight misinformation. We have to be braver in promoting initiatives which support the enlargement policy so that the destiny of these countries does not depend on individual elections. It's like we needed the war to realize the importance of the integration of the Western Balkans into Europe. We don't want to see destabilization of Europe. Europe needs proxies in the Western Balkans which support its project, which support the same objectives, which fight against various conflicts and which are members, which will support also the membership in the NATO, etc. We saw that was an attempt of coup in 2015 in cooperation with pro-Russian forces, and we fought against the attempt of this coup, but there are still consequences. And it seems that only now, in the light of the aggression against Ukraine, certain international players can see what is the threat behind such attempts. We have to face hybrid threats as well from Russia and from the region. It seems that certain Western partners perceive our reality in a wrong way, and this led to the opposition winning the elections in 2020. Unfortunately, this is the point where everything went downhill in Montenegro. In the past 2 years, we've had two unsuccessful governments So Montenegro, that used to be the leader in the process of integration, is now stuck in this process. It has economic problem, it has a constitutional and institutional crisis, and we cannot see the end of it. We are surrounded by governments which are supporting Russia, although they are formally declared as pro-European governments. And this makes the whole situation very difficult. The situation in Montenegro and in this region is much worse than it was 10 years ago, or even several years ago. And if we are to judge from the Montenegrin experience, we certainly have reasons to worry. The ethnic boundaries are being blurred, and there are attempts to show that multi-ethnicity is not possible. And there are certain alternatives which are being offered, such as the Euro-Asian Union. In Montenegro, we wish to have a stable government that will turn us back on the European course and that will be able to deal with grave economic and social challenges that we've had in the past years. And therefore, we expect our European partners, our Western partners, to support us and to perceive those various processes in this region where there is a clear division between pro-European and anti-European forces. Because, unfortunately, we don't choose between one set of European values and another set of European values. No, we have very different sets of values offered there. There are certain forces that would like to keep the status quo, and this will just be fertile ground for the Russian influence to spread in Europe. We have to find a formula how to speed up the integration process together, the process that has not only the technical component but also the political component. And the reviving of the Berlin process is an important step in this context. And we believe that the perspective, European perspective of Montenegro is a real perspective. And we wish Europe to remain united on the entire continent. In the end, just to give a direct answer to your questions, unfortunately, this region of Western Balkans has missed the period of great enlargement enthusiasm. We've had a war on our territory, and after the war had finished, and after the Dayton process, there was a slowdown of the enlargement on the European side. So in the light of these circumstances, I think we have missed a chance to do something that had to be done in our region. And this is important not just for the Western Balkans, but for the European Union as well. And I think the situation with the Ukraine now has reminded us that the enlargement of Europe, of the European Union to Western Balkans is actually also in the interest of the European Union, not only in the interest of the Western Balkans countries. And it's very important for us to be very decisive in pursuing this enlargement policy. And I agree with what Mr. Kurti said. I believe that at this time, European Union is faced with a historic challenge, and European leaders are facing a historic challenge. We are not only here to support defending Ukraine, we are defending European values, because Putin is attacking European values, European stability. If we don't punish this aggression, then we open the door to chaos. And we shouldn't compromise here. What Europe is showing now in pursuing the enlargement policy is something that is of great importance to us, naturally, but Europe has to show long-term intent here. The war in Ukraine will stop eventually. I wish it to stop now, but I have to warn you, the region of Western Balkans is ruined because it did not enjoy the attention of the European Union in this whole period. I could talk for hours about this, but I have to be rational. I just want to warn you, even when the war in Ukraine stops, the process of renewing Western Balkans will still have to go on. Thank you.
Thank you. And having mentioned how important is that the European Union and especially social democratic ideas are present on the Western Balkan, I can immediately give the floor also to our Vice Prime Minister from Montenegro, Raško. The floor is yours.
Najmanje države regiona vidi.
We are the smallest country on the Western Balkans, but there are two representatives from this country of the Western Balkans, which shows, at least we think that Montenegro has a special importance for the Western Balkans. Allow for me first to welcome you all, to thank for the organization of this meeting, and to share with you some observations on the topics that are very topical on the Western Balkans, with a review on the situation in Montenegro and the European perspective of our countries as the only right political goal. The enlargement policy, perhaps is commonplace, is one of the most successful policies of the EU. It has always been the confirmation of the superiority of the values underlying the EU, since these values over time have become the basic orientation point for many countries that have become full-fledged members of the EU. Its success has always been a good test of the political situation of the EU as a whole, because nothing has such a good impact on the stability of a system as the idea that the ideas promoted by it become a commonplace, as a binding point, as the point of acceptance of different peoples and societies. Because of that, the successful enlargement policy, which is a nominal foreign policy of the EU, is an indicator of its internal consolidation as an instrument of its strengthening. It is clear that the EU must build its capability of attractiveness to its immediate neighborhood, because otherwise it cannot be perceived as a geopolitical factor which is strong enough to be competitive in a very complex global economic, political and security race. Without the entirety of the European region that will be based on the values of modern, civilized, democratic and prosperous society, the goals that led the founders of the EU will not be fulfilled fully. The challenges faced by the enlargement policies over the past years, especially having in mind the current developments in 2022, are without precedent since the beginning of this policy, since the end of the Second World War. On the European territory, you have a brutal war, brutal Russian aggression against a sovereign state. We need to remember that the cause of this aggression is the will of the country which is the victim, the Ukraine, to sovereignly govern its future that it saw in its bindings with the democratic countries. The countries of the region, fortunately, have no such painful experience as Ukraine has, but it has the same malignant experience from the same source. this system, Russia uses soft power to undermine the region. And this particular meeting, as well as other activities of our social democratic friends, which I would like to especially point out to Tonina Pizzula, the EU becomes more aware of the importance of enlargement policy to the Western Balkans and is aware of the challenges it faced. Dear friends, Montenegro has the only right future in the full-fledged membership in the EU the membership that is earned through the reforms, fight against organized crime, stronger institutions. Without that, there is no better society, there is no membership in the EU. However, the EU today needs to show that its doors are open and the countries of the West Balkans are partners which it wishes to accept as soon as possible. Montenegro decided on its strategic course, the EU and NATO membership, and it showed to which system it wants to belong. At the time when this choice was made, this was not a light process because it faced already then a strong political resistance of some structures that based their ideas on nationalism, anti-European attitude. As today, this resistance has not ceased, but it changed its form and intensity of its activities depending on the broader and international circumstances. Montenegro was always a country and a society that could not be defined in figures. Throughout its history, its importance surpassed its size, and it is because its geographical position. Montenegro is a place where different cultures, civilization circles meet, the East and the West. Because of that, Montenegro in the past time was the target of different political policies and structures which want to deviate Montenegro from its path into the European integrations. And there is a division within our society to the pro-Western part and the other part which sees the destiny of Montenegro in anti-civilization worldviews, and this is shown through the resistance to the democratic order that is symbolized by the EU. These forces call upon the bindings, ties between Montenegro and Russia. However, they interpret these bonds differently, and they see this in two basic things. One is greater Serbian nationalism, which clerical elements and the role of the Serbian Orthodox Church, and the other is linked to Russia and to the current policy of Russia. Political changes in Montenegro happened in Montenegro 2 years ago. If the context was different, this should make somebody happy. However, Montenegro experienced after these changes that the deviations which existed in the past become even more prominent. What is the fundamental, and this is the strategic orientation of the country, and the has been called into question. We knew then that the changes in this way will lead to regression. Today in Montenegro, dear friends, there is a pro-Russian structure, such as the Democratic Front, which controls the parliamentary majority. Other parties of this majority, which are nominally of pro-European orientation, are not able to resist the leadership of this Democratic Front. The consequence of this is that the Montenegro in the last 2 years has become one of the major problems of our European partners, a country that has stagnated on all levels when it comes to the integration process. Over the past months, months, this regression became a constitutional violence, which is the abuse of the caretaker government that is controlled by the Democratic Front. What is concerning is that over the last 2 years, through different personal decisions, this opened a space for undermining all those values that are a synonym for open and European society. The social atmosphere becomes very clear, very close to what we had in the 1990s. There are a lot of Russian proxies that activate more or less conspicuous, and their actions are tolerated. Because of that, the support of our European friends, you and the social democratic family, is needed more than ever. This is the moment when we need to act resolutely, and we are happy that this is done by the European Parliament and the representatives of our political group. All these activities and yesterday's conclusions and the conclusions of the Tirana summit show the support to the very clear perspective of the full-fledged membership of the countries of the Western Balkans in the European Union. Through this meeting in the region, the European Union shown at this level how aware it is of the importance of the enlargement process for the sustainability of the region and the European Union. We believe that everything that happens over the year and a half will mobilize our European friends and all progressive forces in the region to strongly work on the integration and on the promotion of the European agenda. Negative trends and revival of the nationalist matrices from the 90s, as well as malignant external influences, have never been more prominent than they are today. Because of that, it is high time to act strongly, that needs to defeat this policy of the past and that needs to the victory of the pro-European forces. Thank you very much.
Thank you for underlining the challenges that the region and all of us are facing at this moment in this process. And now I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Dimitar Kovacevic. But before that, I would like to underline the courage that your country had in implementing many reforms and the challenges that is facing now to introduce on the constitution the Bulgarian minorities. And I would like that you answer to us how you are planning to move on this issue and have the opposition on this path.
Dear President Ms. Garcia Perez, dear colleagues and dear friends, it's Dimitar Kovacevsky, President of Social Democratic Union of Macedonia. And there is a great wine actually in Serbia which is owned by the family Kovacevic there. So you should try it. Dear colleagues and dear friends, for me it is a great honor to speak today among such great leaders, among sincere friends, among people with whom I know we share the same values and vision for a better and a more just world. And I am happy to see that there are so many of us fighting for the right cause for our current and future progress. Let me be frank and open. I feel great excitement, joy, and proud when I arrived at our today's meeting. It is because I still remember the pleasure and my feelings when we had meetings in the mid-90s, both in Skopje, but moreover abroad, at the Socialist Youth International conferences, summer schools, workshops. And I cannot be more grateful that I belong to the core generations of young social democrats that grew, learned, and developed together, that shared and are sharing the same core values and principles, and moreover are continuously implementing our country's political, economic, and social life. And believe me, even today I share the same enthusiasm as back then, and I feel the same energy, eagerness, and determination to continue our important work. And our work is important, even more so now when we are facing such challenging times for social democracy. Therefore, in my speech, I will talk about social democratic policies, but I will also highlight several remarks and warnings that EU must seriously understand and support, which may be local but have regional and therefore global impact. We are living in the biggest economic and energy crisis after the World War II, and we are seeing war on the European continent, something that we didn't thought would ever happen again. We thought we've learned our lessons 77 years ago, but I guess history will repeat itself until we finally learn from it. So yet again, we are facing increased instability, poverty, rise of nationalism, and dangerous populism and great division and polarization by many lines. Some days it seems like there is no middle ground, and it seems that the world is going through a turmoil from which a new world should and will arise. The question today is, can the social democracy save and stabilize the world again? Can we ensure economic prosperity and social stability and safeguard democracy for future generations? Can we transform society again and create a better future for our generation and for our children? These are tough questions, I know, and the debate can be hard and long on this, but for myself, I can say that I am a rational optimist, as I like to say often. This means that I believe in a better future, but work hard to achieve the set goals on the way to the better future. Step by step, working towards a better, just, free, and inclusive society for all. For my homeland, for North Macedonia, these hard questions are also an overarching theme, but this rational approach that I took yielded real, tangible results in a very short time. I became president of SDSM and prime minister in the very heat of the economic crisis, when the world slowly left the pandemic behind. Soon after the Russian aggression on Ukraine, and that pressed us even deeper into the economic and energy crisis that we have ever faced on the European continent. In the past 10 months, we managed to overcome the challenges imposed by the global economic and energy crisis and practically save and preserve the capacity of the Macedonian economy at all. When the war started, it was not clear whether would be enough food, electricity, heating, gasoline, there will be enough financial resources. This was a difficult situation for all, but it was and still is most challenging for the most vulnerable citizens. My promise and my mission was, and still is, that no one will be left behind. And we did not leave anyone behind. And I still strongly believe that this is the right path and the essence of social democracy. That is the most appropriate response to the crisis, based on the values of solidarity and justice. So we focused on the most financially vulnerable categories of citizens, pensioners with small pensions, single parents, students, and other vulnerable categories of citizens. We decided to act responsibly, and in these times of need, with this responsible approach, allocated available budgets correctly and returned the money to the citizens when it was most needed. We provided 2 packages of anti-crisis measures to protect the most vulnerable citizens with over 5% of GDP, which is the biggest package in the entire region. With the same responsible approach, we were also able to provide liquidity to the companies, ensuring job security for all our citizens. In good faith and hands-on management, we managed to provide enough food, electricity, and heating, so no one is left alone. The living standard is one of the most important issues for us. By doing this, we have managed to protect the living standard and the dignity of all the citizens. We have also increased the minimum wage. We increased the wages in the most crucial public sectors: education, health, security. We have also raised the pensions, making people will have enough means to relieve the inflation that the crisis brought together with it. Anti-crisis measures and all the other steps that we took are yielding results. But of course, we still have work to do in front of us. As I often say, this is a time for solidarity, not a time for abundance. So we are taking it step by step, but with full force to protect the living standard of the citizens. With the same responsible approach, but also with a vision for the future, we approach the energy transformation that we need so much, especially in the time where lack of energy is a daily problem. North Macedonia has abundant resources. We have sun for 280 days of the year. We have water, fertile soil. With the right support and management, I am confident that we can transform our beautiful country into a green energy hub and ensure both energy independence and supply the region with electricity from renewables. The European Union offers the support and will be a trusted partner in this transformation. We are working together with you on the opportunities to develop projects in the energy sector. This is the future and it is not out of our reach. We are already taking the first steps, and I am confident that we will realize our vision and ensure investments in the industries of the future that will bring us more jobs, better paid jobs, bring us better shared future. The green energy transition is definitely underway. So we have started construction of big solar power plants that we didn't have before, and by the end of 2023, we expect between 200 and 300 megawatts of solar power plants to be connected to the grid. This is an indication of where we are going as a society. It is an indication that we are also following the global circumstances towards renewable energy sources. We are thinking about energy, but also about the environment and quality of life. This brings me to the next important topic I would like to share with you. We are entering a new phase, a new economic vision, where we see the crisis as an opportunity for developing and for creating a better standard for our citizens. We need economic progress and development. No society can thrive without it. When I talk about economic development, two main focuses is actually job creation and better paid jobs. Only in the first 10 months of the year, we have managed to create more than 2,000 jobs with new foreign direct investments. And that is something that we, and that I personally will continue to do in the future. Because in order to curb the effects of the crisis, we can do two things. The first is that we directly support the citizens with anti-crisis measures that will ease the effects of the crisis, which we are doing with full force. The second one is that we work on the economy and create better paid jobs so people can have better salaries that will help them live through this high inflation and might even, I say, help them thrive in times of crisis. The challenge is here, but with hard work, nothing is impossible. This is our main focus alongside our EU integration, because our citizens deserve a better future. This war, among others, has proven that in order for Europe to be a secure and strong continent, the European Union needs a peaceful and integrated Western Balkans region. The enlargement issue is no longer just an enlargement issue, but it's also a geostrategic and security issue. That is why we worked diligently on the European Union accession and worked on getting the best possible proposal from the European Union that will incorporate our positions. And on the 19th of July, we have started the long-awaited negotiations with the European Union. In the process, we secured the Macedonian language in the European Union. We protected the Macedonian identity once and for all. We've signed the Frontex agreement in Macedonian language. that proved that the European Union is a credible partner and delivers its promises. We've secured that the screening process will be merit-based, and we as a country are ready to take on next challenges that will bring us closer to fulfilling our strategic goal, full-fledged membership in the European Union. Our hard work for the European Union membership is not only for the sake of the membership itself. It is our pledge to a society that lives by European values, society with a better educational, social, and health system, a country with a thriving economy, better standard of living, and wealthier citizens. Therefore, I want to make several warnings to the European Union and joint actions that are required. The Union must not allow new blockades. I expect from the European Union to watch the progress of my country and the contribution it makes and not allow blackmail from anyone in the process. Let's talk about criteria and their fulfillment, because the credibility of the European Union in the Balkans is seen through the example of North Macedonia. If that credibility is lost, the European Union risks losing the entire region. Second, the European Union must seriously consider the obstructions of the opposition and the attempts to threaten the European path at any cost by VMRO DPMNE and Levica. I mentioned the rise of populism in Europe. Populism is rising far faster in the Western Balkans. There is a political party called Levica, but it has nothing to do with the left. They are more the far right. The sentence and the words which I am using for them is that they are the agents of chaos. The only thing that they are creating is a chaos in the country. And even bigger danger is that they have taken VMRO DPMNE as a hostage. So VMRO DPMNE, as a conservative party, is competing on the far right for the far right votes with them. So the blockades of the parliament and of the democratic processes for progress towards the European Union are a blockade of European values. European people parties in these circumstances cannot be mere silent observers, because jeopardizing the European path of North Macedonia is jeopardizing European values. Let's make joint efforts not to allow third parties to benefit, to jeopardize European values, and to jeopardize European credibility. The European Union must be clear and loud to all the parties that hinder or block the country's European path. All of these efforts that I just placed in front of you are the benefits of social democratic policies. This is what I believe today's true patriotism is: working hard and making hard decisions, all for a better future of our citizens, better conditions so young people can build their European future in a European Union country, but at home in North Macedonia. As conclusion, I strongly believe that our social democratic policies and approach is our guarantee for a better future. Only through solidarity, clear vision, and hard work we can change the world again. At the very end, thank you for being part of today's family meeting, I would say. Please be sure that, as in the past, you have a strong, credible, and sustainable social democratic partner in me, in the Social Democratic Union of Macedonia, and in my homeland, North Macedonia. Thank you.
Thank you for your so clear message. And we have very present the work that we need to do with your country and with other countries in Western Balkans. So, and now we move for a period of questions and answers. I'm seeing many friends that are working on the region, and I'm sure they have many questions to raise. So, who is the first one? Question marks, not statements. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Isabel, and thanks a lot for all the contributions. All you have mentioned is that it is very important that the integration process is based on values, and one of the main topics and issues we are discussing in the European Union is the issue of migration and refugees. And many refugees and migrations are coming to the European Union crossing the Western Balkan states. And if we are always emphasizing that it is important that we have to stick to our European values, I would like to know how the countries would stick to the European values regarding refugees and migrants, and how can we approve that they can take their right for asylum and so on and so on. And what are your proposals regarding this question? I would like to know. And perhaps you can add for a second question. I think you all have mentioned that it is very important to improve the well-being of the citizens in your country. And one of the main problems are the problems of poverty and social inequality. And I would like to know, what are your proposals to overcome questions of social inequality in your countries to achieve a better well-being for the citizens in your country? Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Koster. I'm going to give the floor to a very important friend of S&D Group, our friend Svoboda. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I have two questions. The one is, or two ideas. The one is, how can the European Socialists and Democrats group organize in all Europe a wider coalition of all the friends of the Western Balkans? I know that there are some initiatives also from FEPS and from others, and I discussed it recently also with your colleague Thijs. Maybe it's a good idea. This conference is wonderful. I'm very happy that the group is now so active on the Western Balkans. But in all our member countries, we have NGOs, we have different groups who are interested in the Western Balkans. And I think out of this conference also, it would be very good to organize them, to bring them together, members of the national parliaments with the European parliamentarians and many others, to really give now this boost, a wider perspective in organizing all those who have a positive element and a positive support for the enlargement of the Western Balkans. I think that, and the second question, now that the Prime Minister of North Macedonia is not here for the moment, but maybe one can a bit discuss what can the group do also to bring people in Bulgaria from our side in a more positive element towards North Macedonia, and not to bring too much on the national bilateral issues into the multilateral framework. But maybe the first question was the more important.
Thank you. The first question is the question that we are going to address on the second panel with our friends from Western Balkans, and we will find the answers for the question. And the second question, Dimitri is coming and he will answer you. And now I'm going to give the floor to Delara and after to you. And after Olekas. Okay?
Okay. Ich werde es auch versuchen, sehr kurz zu machen. Vielen Dank erstmal für, vielen Dank erstmal für alle sehr wichtigen Kommentare, und alle Genossen haben ja auch ganz klar gemacht, dass es einen Unterschied gibt, Europafreund zu sein oder sich nur so zu nennen, und das hat reale politische Auswirkungen. Und wir befinden uns ja gerade in diesem Spagat zwischen Geopolitik und dem, was die Kommission auch tun muss, ihren Job als Hüterin der Verträge. Und alle haben ja auch klar gemacht, dass da ein Spannungsfeld gibt, und mich würde vor diesem Hintergrund einmal interessieren, wie ihr die...
the Enlargement Commissioner was Hedi, and I'd like to know if he's doing his job as defender of the treaty. I have my own views on that, and I'd like to hear your perspective on that. The second question is a very fundamental one. We're talking not only about the promise of enlargement, but putting a real timetable to the process. And how would you get the West Balkan states to fit in with the Green Deal? So what's happening with the money that's being invested in the region? Are you bringing this region on the path of climate neutrality? I'd like to hear your views on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Delara. Now the floor is to Matthias.
Yeah, hello, Matthias Nemec from Slovenia. Actually, I'm going to be brief. The Western Balkans are entering in a quite interesting moment right now, especially not just because the Schengen enlargement, but I mean also about the Bosnia position, of course the visa liberalization of Kosovo, of course the North Macedonian issues. But actually I have a question to our Montenegrin friends. We are going to have a very important voting next week in a Skupština. I mean, it could be, an important crossroad for your future. I mean, I think about the constitutional crisis that you are facing. So what could be the results next week at the voting? Because it seems like that you are actually deciding what could be the future of North Macedonia. I mean, Western-oriented or going back to some past thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthias. Olekas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to welcome our colleagues here and thanks for the statements. Welcome the Tirana meeting format. And I have the question from my country experience. I'm from Lithuania. In beginning of 2000, we have the format between the Baltic and Adriatic region, and it was quite successful in our way to the membership in the European Union. Do you have somehow the relation or maybe format with the others candidates of the European Union in the eastern part of Europe? Ukraine, Georgia, or Moldova, how you think it will be possible to cooperate and act together, not compete, but cooperate and act to join the European Union as soon as possible? Thank you very much.
Thank you, and now Thijs.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm already sitting here on the Western Balkan side. Now, I would like to support also what Delara said, because I think it's important that we, as a European Union, start to speak in coherent and clear language, not only when it comes to the acceleration that we are promoting, but also when it comes to upholding, as the Commission should do, and we filed this amendment to the report of the CFSP on an investigation into whether the conduct of the Commission is in line with the treaties and also with the obligations of the Commission under the Code of Conduct. Because the Commission should speak with one clear voice when it comes to the rule of law, when it comes to the principles that are dear to our group, that are dear to our friends who are here, and I'm thrilled that you are here. My question to you is, and I think that links also to what Hannes Svoboda said, how can we bring the story of the Western Balkans to the member states, to our member states? I think we need to find more ways to get connections, to create bridges, because if we cannot do it now with the strategic importance of the enlargement to the Western Balkans, with all the pressure that there is on the east side of the European Union, if we cannot do it now, then when can we do it? So we need to step up in this moment of time and do this together. So I hope that you have some ideas on bringing the story of the Western Balkans also to the member states, as Hannes also said. Thank you.
Thank you, and now Svetlina, the floor is yours. And I close this period of questions and answers because we are moving to a ceremony, but before we need to have the answers from our friends, and the time is running.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate all the messages that you've delivered to us. I think we've all agreed, and you have our full support for the enlargement. I have two questions. The first one, you've all mentioned that it is very clear in terms of the strategies, where are the reforms you need to be doing in each one of the respective countries. If you have to identify the two top priority areas in each one of the countries in terms of the reforms that you need to be making as an immediate steps, would you be able to define those, the top two priorities? And I guess it's no surprise that I'm going to also raise the matter in terms of the relationship of Bulgaria and North Macedonia. It's been a topic of discussion. I know that we are going on the right path finally, which is appreciated by both of our countries. But I would reiterate back to the question that was posed at the beginning by Ms. Santos as well, in terms of the recognition of Bulgarian minorities in the constitution. We appreciate that there are quite intense conversations, but when we're speaking about matters like that, it's a two-way street, and the equal treatment on all sides and equality is quite crucial, as for our family as within the Union as well. Thank you so much. This was a question, of course, to Prime Minister Kovačevski.
So, big questions for short answers. So, and you want to start?
Kosovo is not part of any transit route for migration. And we believe that one of the best ways to fight the phenomena of people fleeing from their countries is attaching social justice to economic growth, distribution and redistribution, social policies. What we have done in Kosovo is we have increased social welfare, monthly allowances for new mothers and children, pensions increased by 11%, for disabled persons by 33%. We have added a package to reduce the impact of the inflation, in addition to economic recovery package, subsidy of electricity bills for those who save electricity. For example, if you save in this month in comparison to the same month last year, we double the reward of your saving. Then one-off doubling of social assistance payments for September 2022, one-off payments for pensioners, students and employees in public enterprises also in September 2022. And we have had a 10% increase in monthly salaries for public sector employees since September this year. We have free public education at all levels. Only for PhD you have to pay, not for bachelor and master degree. And 1,365 scholarships for women and girls, students in STEM fields, and 500 scholarships for non-majority minority communities. So social justice is very important to bring back faith of people in the institutions of the system, but at the same time to prevent a brain drain and continuous migration, because there is not only migration from other countries via Balkans to EU, there's a lot of migration from the Balkans towards EU. 6 countries of Western Balkans altogether, their population is like Netherlands, approximately. Population-wise, we're like Netherlands. GDP-wise, we're like Slovakia. Not even 1/6 of North Rhine-Westphalia, for example, or not even 40% of Czech Republic. So Western Balkans is not a big burden as it seems. On the contrary, I think EU would gain a lot. The external border of EU, which is long like 3,000 kilometers, would shrink by that size, because Western Balkans would be included into EU, and EU would have shorter external border. But at the same time, security concerns are of utmost importance. Obviously, there is malign influence of Russian Federation, and with the inclusion into EU, we will bring more democracy to Western Balkans and less of the Russian influence. Mr. Svoboda, what I believe should be done is you, our comrades, to visit Balkans as often as possible. Create different kind of groups and teams who are going to visit our countries and see yourself the progress that we are making. Also some of the hardships. Don't meet only the government, meet the opposition as well. And 3 main points are human rights, political pluralism, and no neutrality towards Russian invasion of Ukraine. Very important, these 3 points. If we want to strengthen and defend democracy, we have to look at human rights and political pluralism. I do not believe in illiberal democracy. There is no such democracy without human rights and without political pluralism. So look at human rights in each country and at political pluralism, and then you understand how strong and real is the democracy there. And here I think, again, European Parliament can play a great role, because that is a place where people are looking at an institution which is not divided on member states, but on ideologies, on thinking. There is the place where we see ourselves as citizens of Europe. And European Parliament, with also its leadership, can play a greater role towards the Western Balkans 6. And on the other hand, the last remark in this panel from me is that we need to reinvent European anti-fascism. It's very important for socialists and Democrats to engage in a new tide of anti-fascism in Europe in 21st century. We have a lot of tradition and history that we can learn from, but fascism does not belong only to 20th century. Our grandmothers and grandfathers were fighting with German and Italian fascism. Half a century ago, we had Pinochet's Chile. But fascism is not reserved for a country or two, or for a certain period in history. It can fall upon every nation and state. We have to be careful. But nowadays, we live at times of Russian fascism. This is Russian fascism. And socialists and Democrats should bring new solidarity with anti-fascism as its building block. And we know from European Union that the true peace is the anti-fascist kind of peace. Only anti-fascist kind of peace is a real peace, sustainable peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, please be short. Your answer.
Zahvaljujem na vrlo
I thank you for very inspiring questions. I could talk about each of these questions individually for a long time, but naturally we have to take time into consideration. So I'll just make a few comments to a couple of your questions. Starting from the end, what are the 2 main reforms that I feel are the most important for our region from the point of view of Montenegro? First of all, we have to reform our education systems so that future generations of young people from our countries can be competitive in the European labor market. I believe that we have intelligent, talented people. I believe that our education systems are somewhat traditional, with a very high level of general education. However, when it comes to specific skills, specialized skills, and competitiveness in the global market, including the European market, I think there is a certain deficit in this area. Secondly, I think it's very important to promote the rule of law. Rule of law is a major deficit in the Western Balkans. It's not surprising where you have a region where every 30, 40 years, there is renewed instability. You cannot expect such a region to have a firm rule of law. So it's very important to work on these issues because this is one of the most important prerequisites for the region and its development. And another issue is how to make this region closer to the European Union. I think the sad experience with Ukraine has made this easier for us. If talking about European policies towards Western Balkans, I believe you will agree with me that at a certain point in time, the enlargement policy was just an administrative issue. But today, I think it is marked by the geopolitical issue of further uniting processes in Europe. I think that it is clear now that Putin will not succeed in its intention to bring the world back to the time of the Cold War. But it's also clear that the current model has not proven to be very efficient either. If it is only this year that we are discussing openly the threat of a nuclear war in Europe, it is clear that something is wrong here. I think that we will have to start creating a new geopolitical architecture, and primarily we want to know where will Europe position itself. In order for Europe to be globally competitive, it has to be stable, first of all. That means also stable in the Western Balkans, and it has to use the resources that we have in the Western Balkans. I think this is understood today, and that's why this issue of enlargement is now facilitated to some extent. I will just try to give some more explanations in this context. Montenegro in the year 2000 had a change of government. My colleague from the Social Democratic Party said that we really perceive this as a chance, because when you've had 30 years of continuity, a change of government could be a real chance to get a new impetus in the democratic and developmental processes. Unfortunately, this happened at a time of an intense hybrid aggression of Russia that has been going on for several years now. In 2016, we had an attempt of a coup in order to prevent Montenegro to join the NATO. We managed to resist this coup, but it is clear that Russia will not give up so easily. It will not take this slap in the face that a small country of Montenegro gave it. So with the help of proxies in this region, Russia managed to install two bases for a hybrid war in this region, in both Serbia and the Republika Srpska are two proxies of Russia's influence in the Western Balkans. You have very strong media, Russian media in those two countries. You have very strong energy structures, Russian energy structures there. You have the Orthodox Church, which Russia abuses, where the people who are at the head of this Orthodox Church talk publicly about this region as another Ukraine. They go to the episcopal of the Russian Orthodox Church and they give blessings to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. And all of this is funded by great quantities of illegal money. So it is no wonder that a small country of Montenegro has not managed to entirely resist these connections. And if we speak about the government in Montenegro and how sensitive it is to the issue of human rights and religious rights and freedoms. And now, after 2 years after, European Parliament has recognized the role of the Orthodox Church in this region. But what can we do now? We have some very wrong perceptions from 2 years ago. So your question is really justified. On our session, at our session on 12th of December, we will try to make some big decisions. And one of the most important decisions will be a decision of premature elections in our country, so that Montenegro can maybe go back to its original track, which is oriented towards the European Union. I'm quite optimistic, but I do have a certain level of bitterness as well, because I believe that we contributed, that a positive example has to be used.
We move to Dimitar Kovacevski. I'm spelling well now. Finally.
We are getting closer and closer. You know, back in 1993, when I was studying in the United States, the name was even more different than it actually is. So there were several questions for me. And I will give one answer for all of them, because they were all related to our European Union integration, the relations with the neighboring countries, and the role of the European Union enlargement policy, and the part of the Commission for enlargement. So when you ask me about the role of the EU enlargement administration and the Commissioner, I don't know for which one you are asking me, because we were waiting for 17 years. So there were many commissioners, presidents of the Commission, which passed through that year. So actually, these 17 years of waiting to start the negotiations actually brought the credibility of the European Union to the lowest level in the country. And this absence of the European Union for 17 years, actually, I would not like to repeat President Djukanovic, but I cannot agree more than that what he has said. Because third-party countries managed to use the space which was left by the European Union, and they built their infrastructure. So what President Djukanovic went through while they were joining NATO, the same I have went through and North Macedonia went through while we were accepting the French proposal to start the negotiations with the European Union. Nothing different, no different players, no different infrastructure, the same. So everything was the same. When we talk about the price which we had to pay in order to start the European Union negotiations, I would say that just look at the Copenhagen criteria and compare with what North Macedonia had to go through in order to start the negotiations. So I think that there is no other country in the world that has made the hardest decision in its history to change the name of the country in order to become member of NATO and to start the negotiations with the European Union. And the European Union, 2 years ago, did not deliver. Did not deliver after that kind of a decision. So politicians in North Macedonia, progressive ones, they lost their political credit because of that decision. And the European Union did not deliver. And after that, another bilateral issue. So Copenhagen criteria are not about bilateral issues. They are about multilateral system of values. Our start of negotiations was stopped for years because of bilateral and regional political issues. But we have proved as North Macedonia that the identity issues, and we are talking here about identity issues, because even if you see the war in Ukraine, it's an identity issue. If you see Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's identity issue. If you see Kosovo, again, it's identity issue. If you see all the open issues which we had in North Macedonia, they were identity issues. And we proved, and we are the best example in North Macedonia, that through the power of diplomacy, these identity issues can be solved. Even if you see the report of the General Secretary of the United Nations, then you will see that North Macedonia is an example that with diplomacy, these issues can be solved. So what was important for us and what is important for us? That the Macedonian language is fully recognized and part of the languages of the European Union, and we achieved this. The Macedonian identity, with Macedonian culture, with all the elements of the Macedonian culture and identity are part of the European identity. And this we also achieved. And this has been clearly stated by the President of the European Commission, by the Vice President of the European Commission, and by all the high guests which we had in Skopje. So now, European Union delivered and proved to be a trusted partner. Good neighborly relations are the basis for European Union integration, and they are the basis of EU. And coming from that point, we have managed to improve in the last 5 years on the highest level the relations with our neighbors. First, it was done with Greece. Now Greece is our biggest supporter on our European Union path. And then we went through negotiations with Bulgaria, facilitated by the presidency of President Macron, and later on a deal signed during the Czech presidency. The relations between the neighbors have to be built based on mutual respect and based on the keeping of dignity of all the citizens in the neighboring countries. And these are the assumptions on which we made the negotiations, and we kept to them until the very end of the negotiations with Bulgaria and the start of the negotiations with the European Union. Now in front of us, we have a dialogue which is built on a future perspective. It is built on building ties between the citizens, between the institutions. Recently, Bulgaria has opened a cultural center official by their Minister of Culture in our country. We will do the same in Bulgaria, because this is the way how neighboring countries should base their relations. We cannot let, like it was done for 11 years, that the relations are left to propagandists and to populists, because this will do nothing good to the region. And that is why the governments have to work closely between themselves based on the principles of mutual respect in order to build these good neighborly relations. And when we come to the constitution, there are two basic types of constitutions. One is where the individual right of self-determination can be exercised only individually. And this is the type of constitution which is in France or which is in Bulgaria. There is another type of constitution where individual rights can be exercised collectively. And this is the type of constitution as we have in North Macedonia or as we have it in Croatia. So North Macedonia is an example of multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, where through the Ohrid peace agreement, we have managed to build institutions on the highest level where every citizen, regardless of his self-determination, can feel North Macedonia as his or her home, which is the base for personal and professional building of career, life, and future. And for the government and for the progressive part of our society, which is a majority, The constitutional change is a step forward towards the other hard decisions which we will have to make on the way to a full membership in the European Union. By this, not only the Bulgarian minority, but also the Croat minority, the Montenegrin minority, the Jewish minority will become, and the others which will have interest to be part of our constitution, will have the possibility to become part of the preamble of the constitution. But on the other side, the European Union has to commit itself, together with us, that we will have a framework of finishing the accession of North Macedonia by 2030. Because if there is a goal, I'm always saying that it can be achieved, because there is no unachievable goal. And that's why I'm saying that for us, for the region, full membership in the European Union should be targeted 2030. Coming back to the first sentence, as I said, the enlargement now is not enlargement a goal for itself. It is a geostrategic and it is a security issue for all the European Union. And for the citizens of North Macedonia, I know it's not going to be easy. Every path to the European Union, it's not easy. It takes decisions, it takes reforms, and we are ready to do them. But at the end of every hard road, there is the goal. And the goal, in this case, is full membership in the European Union. Because we want, and the countries which were part of the Warsaw Agreement, of the Warsaw Pact, and the countries which were part of Yugoslavia, which are now members of the European Union, they know the best what the European Union can bring for their citizens. They know the best how European Union integration can improve their societies. And this is what our citizens in North Macedonia as well deserve. Social justice, economic prosperity, and democracy where critical opinion can be exercised and anytime, everywhere. This is what our citizens deserve, and this is what we politicians in North Macedonia have to achieve through the reforms, but this is also what European Union has to commit and to deliver. Thank you.
Yes, 2030 is the commitment that we adopted in the European Parliament following the leadership of this political group and the leadership of Tonino presenting his report, and this is clear for all of us. 2030 is clear. And now, Rasko, for the last answer and asking you to be very brief.
Ja ću biti vrlo kratak iz razloga što su uvažene prethodne kolege obuhvatili.
I will be very brief because this covers two issues that I agree with, and I wanted to emphasize myself. Regarding these issues of how to better establish the connections with the Western Balkans that Mr. Swoboda talked about, and what we would emphasize as necessary reforms, I think I could summarize this as a single message. Let us not allow that the process of enlargement of Western Balkans after the Ukrainian war is finished, it shouldn't go back to being just an administrative issue. If the European Union does not show enough interest in the Western Balkans now, believe me, there are other stakeholders who will show an interest in the Western Balkans. So let us not discuss this in 2022. Let us discuss this already in December of 2021. I mean, in December 2021, no one could have envisaged what will happen in Europe. Ukraine is a big warning to all of us. Montenegro is not so large that Russia needs it. It doesn't need it, but Montenegro was just supposed to be a sign showing that Russia can do whatever they want in the Western Balkans. And in 2016, Russia wanted to prevent Montenegro from joining NATO. Unfortunately, we've discussed many of the changes that happened in our country, etc. But I won't go back to these developments. But I want to ask you, try to understand these developments better, because the atmosphere in Montenegro now is similar as in the 90s. And I am a part of that generation that was witness to those times, and I think I can draw your attention to that. European Union needs Western Balkans, and Western Balkans has never needed Europe more than now. So let us not allow the European community to make the same mistakes it made in the beginning of the 90s. Let us use that history, that experience, to perceive some things in due time. A mistake was made because we did not learn enough from the experience in the 90s. Thank you.
To close this panel, and before going to a ceremony that will occur in a few minutes, I'll give the floor to our first speaker, Nermin Nikšić, to give a direct answer to a direct question that was raised to him.
Očito smo probili jako rok I pokušat ću zaista da se fokusiram samo na ovaj dio koji se tiče Bosne I Hercegovine.
Well, the truth is that we are running out of time, so I'll just mention the points that were relevant to Bosnia and Herzegovina. As candidates to the European Union, well, for us, this is of the utmost importance at present. Now, as opposition, we have succeeded in seeing that 3 laws were passed. Conflict of interest and public procurement, important pieces of legislation were passed. Now, what has occurred is that we saw there were a number of different resolutions on this matter that were rejected. And we've seen that there was, in fact, a lack of reasoning here, a failure of logic. So when we set up a government, well, what we did was to then comply with the conditions set to enter the European Union and then to the Atlantic integration. That's been pretty much our compass since we've been in government. Now, when it comes to accession, well, these and then the Atlantic shortcomings, well, we basically implemented the laws that were in place, laws that previous governments had pretty much left as dead letters, though, in terms of implementation. So we're doing everything in our power to act on for the interests of our citizens. We don't forget that at the end of the day, we are the country where more citizens leave in terms of our population. That we've been the unfortunate leader in that category in our region. Now, it's clear that the setting up of the new government was slower than we would like. We see it will be, we thought it might be beyond the end of the year, unfortunately. Thank you.
Okay, giving the stage to those that need to prepare the ceremony, I will announce that as an outcome of the summit, we will now proceed to a signature of a declaration of our common goals as S&D group and progressive Western Balkan leaders. We will also take a common photo, and after the signature, we will continue with other panel. Please, colleagues, move in a very smooth way and quickly. Okay? Thank you very much.
No, we're going to bring it up here.
So we are now signing the declaration, and after that we're going to make a photo, so please, MEPs, stay around so that we can have a family photo. Dear MEPs, could you please come forward now so that we can make a picture all together? All of our MEPs, please come forward so that we can make the family photo.
Sada
Let's move to the second panel. Social and democratic family is a very quick family doing the things. The stage is coming prepared. Our guests are coming.
And we have one. Just need to change the names in case we. Six people.
So, dear friends, are we prepared to start, please? Okay. So, Tanya. So now we can start with the second panel, and after having so large overview of what is the will in the Western Balkans and of the outcome of the summit, now we can move discussing how can we cooperate better and have a better exchange of our efforts and our thoughts and our work in order to come to a better result in what is related with the enlargement process. As it was suggested in the question of our friend Svoboda. So now is time to see how the progressive family can cooperate more and better, taking account the challenges of the session process. For this panel, we have Talent Bala, chair of the SP parliamentary group, Socialist Party of Albania, Mr. Nebojsa Novakovic, member of the parliament and representative of Democratic Party of Serbia, Mrs. Marinika Tepic, member of the parliament and opposition leader in the Serbian parliament, member from the Party of Freedom and Justice, and Tonino Pizzula, someone that no one knows in Western Balkans. So the big surprise of this panel, that is S&D Group Foreign Affairs Coordinator and the rapporteur of the most debated in this meeting, the most debated report. So thank you very much, and we will start with our colleagues, Talent Bala, that was the host of the Balkans Summit in his country, and we are keen to listen you about how can we cooperate more and what we can do more and better.
Thank you, Isabel, and good morning to all the colleagues from both European Parliament, our families, Socialists and Democrats, and the Western Balkans. And next time I would propose to the protocol, don't share it in two pieces, the Western Balkans on the left and the European Parliament on the right, but make us together. I'm very happy to come here 2 days after the Tirana summit. I don't hide the, let's say, being proud of the fact that this summit was held in Tirana. It's historical for the fact that for the first time a European Union summit is taking place in one of the capitals of the Western Balkans. And reiterating what Andreas Schieder underlined at the beginning of this meeting today, is 19 years after the Thessaloniki summit, which was the very first summit of European Union to underline the real perspective of the Western Balkan countries as future members of European Union. And here I want to thank Tonino, Isabel, Iratze, Marques and Schieder and everybody that the Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament have been very clear on this message, and I just want to show my enthusiasm for the fact that we have now a kind of a deadline. 2030 has to be the longest deadline of having Western Balkan countries in the European Union, which is good, taking into account so many arguments that I would like to underline them through my floor here today. But once again, coming back to the summit of Tirana, some 5 days before the summit, a very good friend, a big social democrat, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, visited my parliament in Tirana. And within his speech, I would like to just take a piece of that, where he said, whoever in Europe would need some good infection of European spirit, he has to visit Tirana. So by quoting Frank-Walter Steinmeier, I would invite everybody of you that might need some boost of European spirit, come and visit Tirana. We were just finalizing this year, which is the year of the youth. Tirana was the European capital of youth, but honestly, there is more enthusiasm on the European spirit in the Western Balkans than maybe in some of your capitals. And we have to keep this alive by taking into account the challenges that democracy is facing, and we Socialists and Democrats in Europe have to tackle with this and have to win this battle. Secondly, I would say that Europe is facing a very crucial and difficult moment since the end of the Second World War. It is a question of security. It is a question of our values put in risk. And by saying this, I want to be very clear. Vladimir Putin has not attacked only Ukraine. Who think like that is not clear enough. Vladimir Putin has attacked our values. He has attacked democracy. And that's why we have to understand that it's not only the people of Ukraine that are fighting for their freedom, are fighting for their land, are fighting for their country. But all we Europeans have to be in solidarity with Ukraine, because we have to understand that our values are at risk. And by saying that, I have to make it clear something that we all know. Everybody of us discuss this in small tables, but we have to be more loudly speaking about it. Russia has been involved in financing political parties elsewhere in Europe. More than $300 million Kremlin has been paying in swaying elections and sponsoring political parties. How it comes that no one of our family has been sponsored by Putin? But those who are against us are being in the payroll of Putin. And our friend Djukanovic spoke about this. Prime Minister Kovachevsky can tell you a lot about this, and I am here also to tell a lot about this. And that's why we socialists and Democrats, and honestly, I'm not happy with the fact that, as we do also, our colleagues from EPP have to be clear, because maybe some of their sister parties in the region are being part of the Putin's payroll. And surely Socialists and Democrats have been pushing in the European Parliament for the last resolution that was approved in 2019 about the interferences of third actors in the democracies of the Western Balkans. And surely here there is another challenge that we need to afford, which is disinformation. It's a Russian word. It comes from desinformatia. It's their invention. And one of the challenges that our democracy in Europe is facing is disinformation. We are not fighting for our programs to be heard. Maybe we are fighting to make clear the real information, or to fight with the disinformation. And thirdly, I want to speak a little bit about the Berlin process, but also the Open Balkan initiative. And I want to be very sincere and very clear. The Open Balkans is the implementation of in the ground of the Berlin process. It's not more than this. So, in fact, the Berlin process has been a good idea, but its impact, its implementation has been lacking in the past. The Open Balkan has been the real implementation in facts by respecting the real principles of the European Union, which is the free movement of people, the free movement of capitals, and surely we need to work more, and surely it has to be all-inclusive, so all the 6 Western Balkans has to be part of it. And last, which is, we are here to give some ideas. I mean, 2030 is not very close, but it's not so far. But what European Parliament can do, because here we can speak about with colleagues that are members of European Parliament. And, you know, I am the chairman of the Albanian delegation to the European Parliament, to the SACP, so the Stabilization Association Parliamentary Committee, which is fine enough. But honestly, the European Parliament has to be the very first to make a step closer. So it's like we need to find an idea how representatives from the 6 parliaments from the Western Balkans can start taking seats in the European Parliament, and somehow their voice to be heard directly. because we have to know that the European Parliament is the real spirit of the democracy within the European Union. That's the only institution which reflects the real voice of the citizens. So by saying this, we in Tirana, Prime Minister Rama, appealed for a European renewal program, which has to be started being prepared. On the very first phases, it will be the reconstruction of Ukraine, but surely we have to think about a European renewal program for the whole Europe, and surely by including the Western Balkan countries. Once again, it's a very short timing, and I as a leader of the group in the Parliament, I know that we have to obey to these rules. So I thank very much the S&D. You have always been on the right direction. For me, it's 20 years that I come in such events, starting with Hannes Svoboda and now with a lot of colleagues. And it is something of proud that you are keeping the flag of supporting the Western Balkan countries joining European Union. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Taulan. And you mentioned that how it is with time limits, and therefore the European Parliament is even worse than any national parliament. You get maximum 1 minute of speaking time. So this is also, but we are running already now out of time, and I think it's not the fault of any of us here, but it is also due to the fact that there is so much to be discussed and to be said. And therefore I think your proposal also of having stronger interlinkage has to take a board, and it's just showing today that we need even more time to discuss. I want to now switch, let's say, the geographic to Serbia to our friend Nebojša Novakovic. And even for me, sometimes it's not easy to pronounce all the names rightly. It's not like for Isabel, which has to even go further, but it is, I want to come to, because there is one of these elephants in the room, which is in Serbia, under the presidency of Vučić, things are not turning for the best, it's turning for the worse. And you come from Democratic Party, which in 2008 took over government, was really a good government of a lot of reforms. But what we see now is that any opposition party in Serbia seems to be lacking resources, space in the media, space to articulate political arguments. So therefore, would be interesting how you're struggling and how we can support you.
Hvala vam puno na prilici da razgovaramo. Sačekat ću samo za prevod. Dakle,
give you just a moment to put your headphones on. Well, you're right when you say that in Serbia the opposition has lots of problems. And the situation in Ukraine has made things much clearer on that front. This isn't new. These trends have been in place since 2012 when the government changed, since day one that Alexander Vučić and Yervačić came into power. These were individuals that everyone knew were implicated in everything that happened in the 90s, where they tried to end with the Serbian democratic institutions. Now it's very clear, but they've been doing this now for 10 years. And we're here among friends. We're here with colleagues. That's why I would like to give you some additional information, which I think will show us better how to understand this problem. Now, it's true that Serbia has an important weight in the region. It's the largest country. We've been in the same state now living for a number of years. But it's clear that the weight of, or the impact of Serbia is not always positive. And that's certainly not the case when the nationalists are in power, such as the case right now. Now, when we look at the situation, we've got to find that the changes have to be made at the highest level. It's not right or proper if just some states make progress. I mean, everything's interrelated in the region. And if you've got a country that's not doing its part, well, it's going to weigh down the entire region. So we've got to find a way to continue our integration in the Union, into the European family. The populists in the region do a pretty good job of coordinating and cooperating. The Hungarians and the Serbian, for example, are great buddies. But it's not really a friendship between peoples. It's between Vucic and Viktor Orban. It's a friendship among the leaders. Now, they're right-wing, they're populists. But they're basically disguised fascists. They do a little bit better job maybe than they did 20 years ago. But this is a real break to progress on the region. And we've got to stand up to the populists in our region. The answer is not just to meet more often. The socialists and Democrats meet more often. That's not the whole solution. Things are a bit more complex than that. We need to actually find comprehensive, complex solutions. Now, I'd like to share some of my personal convictions about my country and about what we can do to improve the current situation. These might be controversial, perhaps. Perhaps they'll lead to more debate. I think it's important to exchange opinions. I think that the 35% from the last survey for support for accession to the European Union, latest survey of support, that's the lowest level of support for integration in our history. That is the fruit of what's been done by the government and the media in my country. There's a very high level of rejection. They're doing everything they can to try and bring that 35% down to 4%, if you will. And Serbian society, I mean, you've got 35% that does seem low. Well, Serbian society is resisting efforts to put cold water on our enthusiasm. It's not really reflected, though, if you look at the things that are said by people in the country. This 35% figure, I think that's even too high for the acceptance of our political leaders. They'd like it lower. Because in Serbia, really, over half of the population has always been in favor of integration. Even 60%, sometimes even 70% have come out in favor of integration and accession. So I would say that Serbia is not a country really turned toward to Russia. I think that's a false impression. Serbia is part of Europe, and Europe is part of our character. When we talk about integration to the European Union, we have to see that this is something which is not in opposition of the will of the people. No, we want integration. It's just the opposite of what Alexander Vucic wants. Those are the ones that are pushing people to look to the East, although the East is no alternative. It's not even an economic alternative, as we can see in the balance of payments. I mean, from a cultural point of view, we always have looked towards Western Europe. And it's true that when it comes to the war in Ukraine, we're always presented as being a pro-Russian country. Well, it's not true. I mean, things could turn on a dime on that front. It's true that we need to give freedom of information to our Serbian people so they can actually see what's happening beyond the country's borders. Only in that way will everyone in Serbia understand better and see why the West and Europe is attractive. Perhaps somebody could say, but Vucic got over 50% of the vote in the last elections. Okay, fair enough. But there's no freedom of the media in the country. The elections exist nominally. I mean, the last one we had was 2012. That was free, but since 2012, these elections have not been free and true elections. All the media is controlled. The state controls everything, and then you've got corruption and criminality that is organized by the government. And in addition to that, if you look at opinions on accession with accession to Europe, or the attitude sometimes of Commissioner Varhe, well, I mean, you know, things play out the way they play out. Again, it's the president who calls the shots in our country. The parliament is a rubber stamp. The media don't discuss what should be discussed. So in this context, it's simply impossible to move forward with the European project. That's why we see the figures of support for accession dropping. And this lack of support is something that comes from people who support the values of Europe but are disillusioned with the European Union because they say that the life in Serbia from day-to-day life is so different from day-to-day life in the rest of Europe. So they're disappointed and disillusioned. We've got to keep that in mind when we see what is said about the support for accession in Serbia. Now, another point. Since the '99 bombing campaign, well, there was some support for NATO at that point in time. And NATO support at this point is actually even lower than it was right after the bombing. Nobody has to be an expert to understand that, in actual fact, this isn't true. This is about being manipulated. I mean, any survey of public opinion in Serbia is basically something which is not reliable. It's been manipulated. Now, Alexander Vucic, you could say that he's basically installed himself in power. He has his views as to what possible solutions for the Western Balkans might consist of. But Alexander Vucic, if he's going to be stabilizing the region with his goals, well, basically it would just be characterizing an autocratic approach. That's something that characterizes the latest crises. I can just reiterate my conviction that many Serbians want to join the European Union, despite the fact that the government doesn't want that. I believe that in the European political family, there is no room for corrupt individuals such as Vucic. This type of government cannot exist in the context of the European Union. And the truth is, this is the policy which is being pursued by Belgrade. We don't want just to leave ourselves to the complaints and problems. I mean, there are solutions. In the long term, well, we can't say 20 years down the road things will be better. No, the solutions need to come sooner, but they're not going to come out of the blue. We're going to need support from European countries. We're going to need freedom of media. We often hear that the opposition in Serbia is weak. Well, with the controls, with the autocrats, it's hard enough to even see how we even have an opposition. I mean, weak, okay, but Vucic really does everything in his power to try and eliminate any opposition whatsoever. That's his goal, no opposition. He wants to remain in power. So when you state that is the opposition as strong or weak in Serbia, I'd change and say, well, there is opposition. We lost in 2012. Now we have 10 members of parliament. We have 9 councillors in Belgrade, city councilmen. It's a very difficult situation indeed. We have 2 statements as a party. We've restated these just a few months ago. We cultivate European values and to maintain looking towards the West and not to cooperate in any way, shape, or form with the Vučić regime. Sorry, we have a technical problem. I'm not going to be able to interpret.
Treba udruživanje. Prevoda nema, jel? I'm gonna switch on English. And every single country, it's not matter is it on Western Balkan or in Europe, it will be in the same situation and will be captured on the same way as Serbia was, because it's not normally conditions for us to be a politician, to be an opposite activist, and so on. And that's why we need help. It's not about that opposition is weak. It's about there is no condition in Serbia to have a regular political life, which party is also an opposition, and the space in media to represent our attitudes and our values. So, of course, every single country has its own problems. Serbia has its own. We, unfortunately, have a really bad background. We are losing 2 wars for time. I have to finish. I'm really sorry. But, okay, let's point. Everything I said, all bunch of problems can be resolved in a short period of time. We don't have so much time. We don't have another 2 decades to spend. We can resolve it, and yes, we need your help. We need to cooperate stronger, and it's not just that we need it. It should be like that, because that's why we are part of Social Democrats. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have much time, but we will continue with Serbia. And we will move to Marinika Tepic. I have 2 questions for you. You are an oppositional chair of the Joint Parliamentary Committee with the EU. And in that condition, I would like to ask you, how do you see the interparliamentary cooperation, and how can we improve this cooperation? And the other question is a more sensitive question, but we need spicy on this debate. How do you see the opinion of many people, and that is on the report, enlargement report, that the negotiations for a session with your country should only move if your country adopts the sanctions against Russia? This is a more spicy question, but we need a little bit of spice and salt on this debate. Thank you very much.
Zahvaljujem prvo I na pozivu na ovom značajnom summitu.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this invitation. I won't repeat what's already been said. I'd like to give some specific replies to your questions, but I'd also like to begin by presenting myself. Not everyone has been aware of my presence here. Now, I'm from the Slobodan Pravda, the Freedom and Justice Party. In 2012, we boycotted the elections, and we were very severely criticized by colleagues in Europe at that point in time for boycotting the elections. But in the last years, we've read the declarations from the Commission. We've read what's been produced by way of resolutions in the European Parliament. We really took the right decision back in 2012, so that public opinion really became aware of what the political situation was in Serbia and how decisions were being taken in the country. We drew attention to the anti-European propaganda, in particular propaganda, which was anti-West in general, and pro-Russian propaganda in our country. And we've seen that this is not new. It's been the case in our country for a long time, but nobody's done anything about it. Now, with the war in Ukraine, everyone's understood what we were saying. But we've been telling everyone what the situation was for years now. It wasn't that clear before, how clear the impact was of Putin and Vucic's decisions. So imagine the situation in which we find ourselves as opposition leaders in Serbia. We're the only country in Europe where the political leaders do not want to harmonize their external policy to be in line with European external policy. But they've said since the situation is, why would they want to do this? Back in April, we had elections to the parliament. We participated as a representative of the opposition. Also, my colleague here took part in those elections. So here we are. This is the situation that we're in now. We are the leaders of the opposition. We have a foreign affairs minister, Dacic, who is a direct representative of Soviet, or rather Russian policy. I mean, he's Milošević's child, and we've seen that he's the voice of our foreign policy outside of the country, and that's the way things are. I've got Hulen, who's in charge of the security forces and information, well, basically the secret police in our country, and he's even more radical. So we've got the president and the head of the government, but then the second most important positions are openly arguing for not going down the European path. Dacic is perhaps a bit more subtle, but Hulen says it quite very loudly and vocally. He's also said that he's very, very proud of the fact that he has spied on opposition figures in Belgrade and passed along the information to Putin. So we've seen that people that were then reported were imprisoned and put in jail for 5 years in Russia. So that's the situation we currently see in our country. So I agree with everything that's been said by others here today. It's very clear that we that do share social democratic values, including in Serbia. Well, we study this. We see what happened with Milošević. That led to war. That led to war with our brothers and sisters in the other countries in the former Yugoslavia. But we grew with the same values as our brothers, and now for 30 years we've aspired to become part of the European family. Nebusha said something before me that was very true, and that was support for integration into Europe has never been lower, 35–40%. Those figures have never been lower. That's an unfortunate, discouraging figure, yes, but I understand it. I mean, we're impatient. We've been waiting for a long time now. And there's always new criteria introduced. For example, when Bulgaria and Romania entered into the European Union, it seemed that they had higher levels of corruption than we have in Serbia, and yet they were able to enter into the European Union. Of course, the question of wars was an issue, and Copenhagen meant that we had to cooperate with the International Tribunal in The Hague. That was part of the package, which was at the center of negotiations when we asked for candidate status But these are all factors which do make our situation different from other countries in the region. Now, turning to your specific question, well, in Strasbourg a couple weeks ago, I was speaking with Alexander Moretti, and we co-chaired the joint committee, and this co-chairing, I think, went more smoothly than in the past. This does set a precedent that we've got a member from the opposition of Serbia is co-chairing a body within the inter-parliamentary arrangements. That undoubtedly was the result of efforts which are ongoing, and the opposition achieved this through our efforts to achieve this. So, for us, we don't see that this is something that that was given to us by a government. No, this was something that we earned out of our own merit. Now, something else that was said by Moretti, something that's not in the European Commission report or in parliamentary resolutions. This is something that we will have to deal with, I believe, in January. Well, we've heard what Bilčić and Maltias, I don't see them here, but they were here. Well, that they're going to be visiting us in Belgrade to continue with this interparliamentary discussion or dialogue on the electoral situation in the country. And we'll discuss the need to change the regulations of the Serbian parliament. There's a document here. It's not a bad document in and of itself, but it is a bit off. I mean, we are discussing presently in the Serbian parliament the budget. And we see that the regulation has made it possible to basically turn off the microphones of the opposition, to not discuss anything with the opposition. Well, I don't want to get into too many details here, but you'll see for yourselves when you do visit us in Belgrade. And frankly, I am skeptical that this interparliamentary dialogue will lead to much. I mean, the last time when you came, when Fajon and Bilčić came back in 2020, well, a document was published that didn't really help at all. And some of us think, in fact, this was counterproductive. The only thing that Vučić actually implemented was to reduce the 5 to 3%, and this was not something that Serbians wanted. But the report led to Vučić taking worse measures, and now we see that the extreme right has come into parliament. Now we have somebody who's leading well, we've got a new Cecil. I mean, Cecil back in the wars, we've got a younger version of him. He's a bit sexier. But Vučić's spiritual father is Sečić, and this 3% meant that by dropping the level from 5% to 3% to have parliamentary representation meant that now you've got the extreme right of that party, of that ilk, in the parliament. And what we asked for Fajon to help us with was, in fact, that the media should no longer be owned by the government directly. I mean, this is something which is paid for by the taxpayers at the end of the day, but nothing moved forward on that front. I was the head of list for the largest opposition party, and we only had 10 minutes on the public media during the entire campaign. And in a debate, we were given 6 minutes. So basically, we had 6 or 7 minutes for our entire on the public media. And even though I was a member of parliament back in 2006, and we were members of parliament, had more time then, but in 2020, that's all the time we got. Now, when we boycotted the elections in 2012, we were in Parliament at that point in time. And we used to meet in the hallways of the Parliament because they wouldn't turn our microphones on to give us the floor. So what we also want is that there's less pressure on civil servants. That's 5% of the population of our country. Our population is quite homogeneous, or heterogeneous, in fact. It's the largest employer in our country, is the public sector, more than the private. Education, security, culture, that's all run by the state. That's another way that you keep the population under your thumb. So how can you help us? Well, I think we've got to give thought to what Pizzula said and others. Why don't we come forward with a proposal so that members of Parliament should be able to vote for representatives in the European Parliament even before we come into the European Union. I mean, we wouldn't, of course, have voting rights, but we would have a voice. I think if we could have a voice as representatives in the European Parliament, I think that would be very, very good. That would show that Europe is extending its embrace towards us and hasn't forgotten us. Another proposal on corruption. There's a tremendous level of corruption in our country, including in the courts. Please support an idea put forward by our party that together with the European Union in Belgrade, we set up a regional center to combat corruption. That would help us. The public prosecutors of Europe could play a role. They would come closer to us because crime and corruption knows no borders. They cooperate quite well across borders. I think that would be an important step that Europe could take. I think that this idea could become a formal proposal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before the famous Tonino Pizzola gets also the floor, which is the most mentioned MEP today, which is also proof of the success of his report. I want to ask you also to give a clap for our translators, which already overdue the time. Thank you so much. And knowing that the language skills, at least on the podiums anyway, also English, because in order to avoid that in the middle of the discussion, maybe we switch now to English to allow to our translators that they can have also their desired break. They're sitting since the morning in their booths. So thank you so much. We continue in English, and I will now come to Tonino Pizzola because a lot of the proposals which were discussed today are already integrated in the, since some weeks now, famous Pizzola report, which is giving extremely new perspective on a more dynamic and more successful enlargement process. Please, Tonino. The micro doesn't need lunch breaks.
Is it okay now? Okay, thank you. The solidarity among us. Yeah. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, Isabel. Of course, I would like to thank all colleagues who took a part in this panel, of course, organized here in beautiful Vienna. Of course, I know as experienced, unfortunately, politicians, there is a time when you need to be quick, not smart, and this is exactly now. I need to perform how speed I can, delivering some basic thoughts on this very interesting and finally hot issue in European affairs. But just one quick reminder for us all. 10 years ago, European Union won a Nobel Peace Prize. Nobel Peace Prize. I think it was one of the greatest achievements in the European Union history. But back then, who could imagine that 10 years after 2022, European Parliament will give a famous Sakharov Prize to brave Ukrainian people, its president, and civil organizations. only 10 years after. So I think that plate tectonics of geopolitical now forced us to be absolutely accurate in our political plans. And I'm very happy that this year is the final year that we talk only about 6 Western Balkans countries, about their perspective of enlargement. Next year, all those countries will be joined by the 3 Eastern Partnership countries as well. We are talking since next year about 10 countries in a pipeline. Of course, a different level. But it does mean that the enlargement policy becomes, step by step, part of the mainstream, not anymore a side politics of the European Union. And I think it's a good news for everybody. It's a good news for countries which are aspiring to be part of the European Union. And of course, it's a great news for the European Union itself. So enlargement politics, it's not a free ride. We all know that. But it must be a ride free of unexpected obstacles and expectations, in a way. So we try in the European Parliament to give our fair share on this. And let me say that I would like here mention a couple of the novelties we are proposing and stop after that, giving a chance to our colleagues to ask the questions. So as I said, European membership means more than just EU funds and transport corridors. Before anything, it represents a set of the values we all need to respect. So when talking about this new enlargement strategy adopted 2 weeks ago, let me just mention why novel is it. First of all, we try to put in clear deadlines for concluding negotiations with accession countries, and these negotiations should finish by 2030 at the latest. And my modest remark on this, 2030 must not be new glass ceiling. Talk about it, but it's impenetrable. It would be hard to say. But it's not only up to us, it's only, of course, the general consultation. Another novelty, I think it's important, and there will be a debate about it. It's a qualified majority decisions on the start of the negotiations, opening and closing of individual chapters. The final decision would still be unanimous. So the purpose of this proposal, I think it's clear for everybody to prevent some sad cases in the, let's say, recent history. Chief negotiator from the EU side for each country. We are motivated by the good example of Monsieur Barnier, who led our negotiations with London during the Brexit time. So we would like to give a human face, and of course it's a semi-joke, to enlargement negotiations that, of course, a special man or woman would be appointed to lead, to be representative for each negotiation process. Another, establishing cooperation between European Public Prosecutor Office, EPPO, and the accession countries. That's something on the, try to be tracked of what Madam Tepic just said, because the heart of the process is respecting the rule of law and combat organized crime and corruption. In that sense, it's another proposal, a formal assessment of accession countries under EU rule of law mechanism, and the report to the EU Justice Scoreboard. I think these 2 wings can fly a whole process towards our main goal, that combat against corruption and organized crime must be a heart of the process in a way. Much more presented in your countries, supported by the, of course, efficient institutions from the European Union. And a creation of special dedicated rule of law task force with the active involvement of judges and prosecutors from the member state. What we would like to see, better engagement, not from the Commission, Parliament, but from the member states. It's also part of the deal. They can't be observers in the process. They must be better involved as individual member states. If we want to win heart and minds of citizens of respective member states, we need to be present in their media area and in political arena. I think it's a good channel to do it. And I think what it's maybe the most remarkable, and I think it's important, it's a phase-in. Phase-in of candidate countries into respective EU policies, initiatives, and the single market, including access to EU funds in the respective areas, enabling citizens to experience the benefit of accession throughout the process and not only upon its completion to reward sustainable progress. So, paper is here. We targeted to High Representative, as Commission, and the Council. Now it lives with its own life, but of course we need to give absolutely good political push, meaning you need to do your work in respective Western Balkans and Eastern Partnership countries. And as always, European Parliament will be very, let's say, very strong supporter of enlargement process, which is backbone of the European project. It's my final remark. European Union must remain open project, evolving project, because it's not finished yet if we want to confront our geopolitical rivals, which become more and more nasty in our terrain. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonino. With your agreement, we will put the Q&A session into after, maybe at a coffee outside. So therefore, I would immediately go to ask Pedro Marques, our Vice President of the S&D Group, responsible also for foreign affairs, to give us a final remark and a sum up of the debate today.
Thank you, Andy. It's been a long session. Thank you to all our invitees. I think it was very symbolic what we managed here today. The clear statement by the political family, by the parties, was a very important one. I was asked to bring some closing remarks to this table and to this session. I will try to do so as rapidly as possible. I think we assumed here a clear position from the political family, from us, members of the parliament, but the different parties regarding the enlargement process, with concrete steps and even concrete dates coming to the table. 2030 was presented here more than once as a possible, I would say, challenging scenario, but something that we need to work for. And also, Tonino just brought us, and thank you for that, Tonino, even concrete steps, concrete actions that we could bring to the table and really set the calendar and the political landscape with this concrete path coming from the enlargement report just recently presented. Irache, at the beginning, she really stated clearly that it's the commitment of this political group to pursue enlargement now, as we said at the beginning, as one of the most important, probably the most important of the external action policies, and we need to deliver. I might recall as well some messages that were present all over this morning. The fact that, unfortunately, the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine, it's obviously framing the political landscape and the situation in Europe. It brought war to Europe yet again, decades after the last time we had one, actually a quarter of a century exactly in the region. But at the same time, it represents an opportunity for the enlargement process, because some actors in the European Union now are more aware, probably than in quite a number of years, that there is no alternative to this process if we don't really deliver on the enlargement process. The influences from Russia in different countries, and we saw it clearly here, how Serbia is struggling with not only their own leadership, but all that comes from abroad and the influences, and many other countries pledged clearly, if we don't want Russia to continue to produce divisions and to through nationalisms try to divide the region and the countries, we need to act on the enlargement process. That was certainly a message we got from a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends this morning. I can remember even a word from Prime Minister Kovachevsky when he said, we are at the crossroads, but do we feel, and he said, yes, is realistic, optimistic, as he said, the Social Democrats are the ones that can build a way for a better future out of this situation in which we are, of this crossroads, and that even the region could be a great green hub for Europe also, and deliver also its role in Europe through this process. So these were certainly some positive words that we got through the morning. It's clear, and it was clear for many of the participants, that the unfulfillment of many promises by the EU throughout the years has made it even more politically difficult to argue in the countries for the enlargement and for the European perspective. But it was also clear that it's still the European perspective that we as a political family defend for the region. It is indeed our role as socialists, as social democrats, as we saw recently in the report by Tonino, as members of the European Parliament, not to shy away from defending the European enlargement, even when populists in the region or even in Europe are trying to scare people with fake news, with disinformation, as it was referred, with myths, with everything, that it's any excuse that they may find to try to delay or stall the process. In this meeting, of course, and this summit, it would have not had the political meaning that it had if it was not for the leaders, the top figures from our S&D sister parties in the region that came here to Vienna and that allowed us to have this frank discussion on the European prospects for the Western Balkans. I want to sincerely thank you all from the sister parties, our leaders, our most involved members that came here and showed the unity of the political family regarding the enlargement process. One, of course, final message I would like to leave, it's not by chance that we are here in Vienna, that this Western Balkans Summit was held here in Vienna. It has so much to do with the sheer determination of our head of the Austrian delegation, of all the delegation, of all S&D members. We have quite a few members completely involved in the region, but of course Andy is always one of our most prominent faces in the relation with the Western Balkans. And so Andy, to you, to all the Austrian delegation, to all that made this event possible, I would like to finish in the name of Irache by thanking you for all the effort that you put to make this through. Thanks a lot. I think it was a very good morning that we had together. Thank you.